Episode 7 of the Americas is called the Andes, and obviously it's about the Andes. So this episode opens up in Peru, where we see spectacled bears. We don't see them very often in series, but we have seen them before, and here we basically see a mother and her two cubs, and they're pretty high up the cliffs, they're pretty high in the mountains, but they've got to climb down to get to their feeding grounds, and it's a very good sequence, it's very tense. They say that this is a very perilous journey, and you really do feel it, especially at one point when one of the cubs drifts off, and it looks like it's not going to be able to find its mum again, and they do kind of tease when they get to the bottom that the mum's like, right, where is this other cub, and eventually it pops out and it is fine. That sequence was very good. I really liked seeing the spectacled bears, and it did remind me a little bit of the caribou sequence from a few episodes ago, where the calf got separated from its mother, and it looked like it might not make it back, and it ultimately did. And this kind of felt like that, in that there was tension, but once again, the cub managed to find its mum, which was nice, it was a good ending, but it did kind of feel like, are we doing the same thing again? And that's not the last time they do it in this episode. So while that was a little bit annoying, overall I did really like that sequence, and it was probably one of the best parts of the episode. And then we go to the cloud forests, we see marvellous spatule tail hummingbirds. There's actually a lot of hummingbirds in this part of the world, like the majority of the hummingbirds are here in the Andes. I kind of knew that, but it was nice to have that confirmed. And the marvellous spatule tail hummingbirds are cool. I mean, we've seen them before, and I think Life, certainly in some other series, and they were cool. It was basically them feeding and then displaying to females. They're probably the most impressive looking hummingbirds. And then we explore a bit of the geography of the Andes, we talk about volcanoes, we talk about how there's loads of glaciers in the Andes. Actually, the majority of the world's glaciers are in the Andes. And they did highlight the sort of climate change element there, about how the glaciers are melting and how that's not going to be great for the animals that live there. Nothing we didn't know before, but still good to highlight that. And here we focus on the marbled four-eyed frog, which I've never seen before. It's basically a frog that lives in the freezing cold areas in the glaciers, and it's able to live up there because during the day most of the ice melts. However, at night it freezes again, and the frog ends up freezing with it. And it was very obvious to me that this was an adaptation this frog has. Obviously, there wouldn't be any frogs there if they couldn't hack it up there. However, the fact that Tom Hanks keeps going on about how, it looks like the frog's dead, and the music's even a little bit sad, and then when we see it thawing out, it's kind of like, oh my god, this is amazing. And yeah, it is really cool. It is a really cool adaptation. I kind of wish they'd played up the kind of weird aspect of this, because it is quite strange. I mean, there aren't very many frogs that do this every day anyway. But instead they went for a more emotional route, which I didn't think was really warranted. But overall, I still liked that. That was a good sequence as well. I mean, the frog was cool. I don't think we'd seen that before. I mean, maybe we have in other species, but not like this where it's every day. So that was cool. And again, it's an animal I haven't seen before, so that's always nice to see. And especially in a day and age where we tend to see the same animals over and over again, it is always nice to see something different. So that was really cool as well. And then we go to these really inhospitable rivers where it's basically like boiling water all the time. And this sequence, as much as I liked it, was very cheesy. Like, the narration was on another level. Like, Tom Hanks going, what on earth would live here? Torrent ducks? Like, the torrent duck was cool. I'd never seen torrent ducks before either, I don't think. So that was really cool. I've heard of them, but I've never really seen them. I didn't really know anything about them. But I will say it was slightly overshadowed by how just cheesy the narration was, especially when he keeps referring to them as super ducks. And that basically dominated the rest of the sequence. Every time the chicks did something sort of vaguely interesting, it was like, oh, they've got superpowers. It was just a little bit much, and it was definitely something you wouldn't get in like a British series. But as much as it was very cheesy, I did enjoy it, and I thought it was pretty cool. The sequence itself is good, but again, like the bears, it follows a chick that goes missing. It looks like it's not made it, and eventually it turns out it's fine. Like, it's the third time we've seen that in this series. It's the second time in this episode, and it's similar to the frog. It's like, oh, it's really emotional, but actually it's not. It's just normal. It just feels a little bit like they're adding too much emotion to something which just doesn't really warrant it. And again, showing the same kind of thing over and over again is a little bit annoying. Overall, though, I did actually like that sequence a lot. I mean, I know I've moaned, but the torrent ducks were cool. It was cool seeing them. I feel like maybe if the narration hadn't been as cheesy, and if the narrative structure had been a bit different, like if just focused on how interesting they are rather than like, creating this really emotional narrative about a chick that ultimately was going to be fine anyway, it did kind of feel like, just, did we need this? This could have been a little bit better, but overall, it was still really cool. And, as it stands, it's the best torrent duck sequence I've ever seen. And then we go to the Atacama Desert. It's pretty well known to be the driest place on Earth. And we see when these super blooms come in, when enough moisture comes in that all these flowers are able to bloom. That's really nice. It's really cool. And then we also see these really cool salt flats, this is really interesting. When there's water on top of them, at night, it's such a great mirror on the sky. It just looks like a painting. It's the sort of thing I think if you were there, you could just look at it for hours. Really cool. And here we see the salt flat lizards. So the salt flat lizards look really cool. They're just very iridescent. They really blend in very well with their background. Like, I realise nature isn't driven necessarily entirely by aesthetic, but they looked really cool on screen. And I really liked them as well. Just them hunting for insects was really nice. Them just scurrying around amongst the salt flats was really cool because I hadn't seen that before. This episode had a lot of stuff in it that I hadn't seen before, and I really appreciated that. And then seeing the couples pairing up and then fighting other couples was cool as well. That was a really cool sequence, and it actually went on for quite a while. I feel like it was one of the longer sequences in the episode. So again, another animal I really liked seeing, so that was really good as well. Then we sort of end the episode with flamingos. We see two species of flamingos. We mainly focus on James flamingos, and then obviously the usual Andean flamingos, which are larger. And we basically see them doing exactly what we've seen them do in Planet Earth 2, where they kind of strut around and almost it looks like a dance. It isn't really, but it just kind of looks like it. And it's pretty funny. What does add to that sequence is that they use the Austin Powers theme. It was quite funny. It was something I'd seen before, but it was cool seeing the different flamingos actually, because I didn't really know there were other species there. I kind of thought they were all the same species. And it does kind of end very abruptly with that. But, you know, it was still pretty good. Overall, this episode, while I've moaned about it, I did actually really like it. This is probably one of the best episodes of the series, purely because there's so much in it that you hadn't seen before, so it did feel a bit unique. There was obviously sequences that were made to be more emotional than they needed to. I think the bear sequence gets away with it the most, but because it's the first one, and also I feel like it warrants it a bit more. The ducks, maybe, the frog didn't need to be like that. They could have played the frog like they did the caterpillars in Frozen Planet. I think that would have worked a bit better. But no, overall, really good stuff. And yeah, I mean, highlights for me, it's probably the bears. I really like the Flizzards as well, and to be fair, I'm definitely going to remember the Torrent Ducks, if nothing else, just because of Tom Hanks' really cheesy narration. But no, overall, pretty good stuff. I realise I've moaned a little bit. I feel like I've been moaning a lot about the series as it's gone on, but overall, yes, I am still enjoying the series overall, and this episode was definitely better. I think because the Andes warranted an episode, and I feel like it was a pretty good representation of the Andes. So yeah, what did you think of this episode? Let me know in the comments below. What were your highlights? And yeah, as ever, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, or don't if you don't want to. It's perfectly fine. I'll be doing the next one next week, and I'll see you then. And goodbye.